Hello and welcome to another session of Streaming School. So now we're going to be in a situation where we're going to be offering you some of the wonderful media studies that has been prepared for us by Mr. Matthew Murphy. Obviously this is one of our few non-live lessons, and that is probably going to become something that we endeavour to host and join in more and more just giving you the kind of structure of the timetable and what's going on, simply because more and more teachers are going to have more and more responsibilities with their schools now that things are going to start back up and people are going to be moving over from there. So please enjoy the video, and we look forward to seeing you in the next session for Maths 2.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another week of Media Studies lessons. My name is Matthew Murphy, and I shall be going through some new vocabulary for you today, which is going to be of use to you for both GCSE Media Studies and also BTEC Media Studies. So regardless of the course that you're studying at the moment, this video should be of use to you and should help move your knowledge and understanding forwards. As you can see from looking at the screen, today's lesson is all about media industries, sectors, synergy, and convergence. So we're going to go through each of those terms. We're going to look at what they mean in a media context, and I'm going to be providing you with examples. And then right at the end of this video, there's going to be a task for you to go away and to help you understand what these words mean and to use them in practice. So let's just jump right in. So media industries is the term that GCSE media students will use for all of the different companies and organizations and, in effect, industries which make up the media landscape. So everybody who produces media texts. So they produce a long list of the expectations of what students are expected to understand in terms of media industries for GCSE media. And they are the television industry, magazines, advertising, film, music, both in radio form, but also music videos as well, newspapers, radio, websites, and computer and video games. So as you can see, a long list there, but hopefully ones that you're very much aware of, even if you don't necessarily consume each and every one of them. Hopefully you are aware of these industries and how they contribute to the larger map that makes up the media consumption across the planet. Unfortunately, this is the first time in a video that I've done where I'm going to have to split and say BTEC students are going to be expected to do something slightly different, because for reasons known only to themselves, GCSE and BTEC media courses choose to use different vocabulary in this area. So if you're doing a BTEC course, you won't be expected to think of the media map of existing in that way. This is what yours will look like. The BTEC students they're referred to as media sectors, and there's not as many of them. So for BTEC students, the map of media is considered to be made up of moving image media, so that encompasses TV and films and music videos and anything else that comes under the umbrella of moving image media, games media, audio, both music and talk radio and audio books, etc., things like that. Publishing, so anything that's in a written format, whether that's digital or analog. So reading a newspaper app still is considered as a publishing text. And anything that's web-based, so those are your social media platforms and things like that. So two very different ways of looking at how media is put together from various either industries or sectors. So it's highly unlikely that anybody that's watching this video is studying both GCSE and BTEC media. So just commit to memory those terms that are required for the course that you're studying, because obviously that's going to be extremely important when it comes to answering and understanding exam questions or coursework expectations. So moving forward, I want to pose you a question. I'm going to show you some examples of media texts here, and I want you to think about what they might have in common based on what we've just been looking at. So, Scooby-Doo, Harry Potter, Angry Birds, and Doctor Who. So I'm just going to pause here for 10 seconds and let you have a think about what might these media texts have in common. So hopefully you were able to come up with some suggestion as to what these 4 media texts might have in common. They have multiple things in common. The most salient, most important thing today that I want to draw your attention to is that they exist, each of those media texts exist in more than one of these industries, these ones over here, or sectors. For instance, Scooby-Doo, television program. There has also been a film. There are video games also featuring that character. If we jump over here, using the BTEC terminology, Harry Potter, a moving image product. There have been games. There are audiobooks of Harry Potter's work. And obviously they started out as books. Angry Birds, again, started as a video game and now is a film, amongst other things. I think there was even a children's magazine featuring those characters. So in those instances, the media text that I showed you in the previous slide, one of the things that they all have in common is that they exist in more than one of these industries or sectors. Now, media students are expected to know that there is a name for that phenomenon. And the name for that phenomenon is one of the key words of today's lesson, which is synergy. So whenever a product exists in more than one sector or more than one industry, if that particular property, if you like, is sold through more than one industry or sector, we refer to that product as having synergy. Okay, so the key words from today's lesson, remember, were sectors, industries, synergy, and convergence. So we've come as far as looking at what sectors are, what the industries are, but also what synergy is. So one way to think about it is to move over into something that I've borrowed from maths, which is the Venn diagram. Synergy is really easy to understand if you think about it diagrammatically using a Venn diagram. So if we consider that this circle here represents all games media in the world, and that this circle here represents all the films media in the world, then Angry Birds and those other products that you saw in the slide a moment ago all exist in this red area in the middle, in that crossover between games and films. They exist in more than one industry. They're promoted using more than one industry or sector. And that is simply what synergy means. Now, obviously, I could have made an extraordinarily complicated Venn diagram featuring 5 or 6 circles all overlapping and use a product like Harry Potter to exemplify that. But I wanted to keep the diagram fairly simple, just to give you a different way of thinking about what synergy might be. So hopefully now you're comfortable with what synergy is and where you might find it in the media landscape. But higher level students will be expected to think about things like the benefits and drawbacks of synergy, because synergy is all over the map in terms of media consumption in the 21st century. You will find it in multiple places. In fact, you can probably think of dozens of products from your own media consumption that you're aware of, which are examples of synergy. And to test your higher level ability in an exam or in coursework, you might be expected to write about the benefits and the drawbacks of synergy. So straight off the bat, one of the benefits of synergy is that each element, if you like, that makes up that product helps to promote the others. So the merchandise helps to sell the film, the magazine or the app helps to then also sell the merchandise. And so it's what some people refer to as a virtuous circle, where one thing is influencing another thing for the better. So, for instance, if you are old enough to remember High School Musical, Disney did an awful lot of work to make sure that there were multiple instances in the media landscape where that product existed. Not only was it a film, obviously, there was a huge amount of merchandise. They did books and etc., etc., etc. So, and obviously, it was all synergized through the Disney store. So the Disney store is hugely important in terms of the synergy map that Disney use to help influence and promote their products. Anybody that's ever been in the Disney store will know that every time there is a new Disney product, there is always lots of merchandise to help sell and gain a greater audience for that product. So as I've said on many occasions, the Disney Corporation are very much worthy of study if you're a serious media student. They know what they're doing, they know how the media landscape works, and they exploit it to their maximum benefit. Also, because of synergy, you have things that are referred to as like mega franchises, where a particular media product, whether it's a High School Musical or in this case here, Indiana Jones, and it features across every single imaginable media industry or media sector. So there I've taken the Indiana Jones franchise and broken it down into all the different areas where it exists. So it can be considered to be what's called a mega franchise. So those are some of the benefits of synergy, why synergy exists. It's not all perfect, however. There are some drawbacks of synergy, because, for instance, it might be that the concept of the mega franchise is not particularly helpful. There have been instances where using, again, Disney as an example, there have been instances where a film has come out and it hasn't really done very well. And so that virtuous circle of synergy has actually helped to undermine the product. You might remember from a few years, there was a Disney film called John Carter. It absolutely was a disaster at the box office. And so because it was a disaster at the box office, it then went on to be a disaster in all the other areas. The merchandise didn't sell, etc., etc., etc. So this concept of mega franchises, when it works, it helps to feed that cycle much better. But when it fails across the board. Another, what might be considered a drawback of synergy, is that it can make the media landscape a little bit samey. If we take these two properties here, Marvel Pictures and Star Wars, if you're not a fan of either of those two properties, franchises, you might find the media landscape pretty boring, because it's hard to escape those particular properties, because they're everywhere. They're in games, they're in films, they're in TV shows. So if you're after a more sort of varied media diet, you might find it difficult to do that because of these mega franchises which are everywhere, and seem to be getting all the publicity and all the exposure on various social media platforms, etc., etc., etc. So those are some of the drawbacks of synergy. The final vocabulary term that I wanted to introduce in this lesson was the concept of media convergence. And as it says on the screen there, media convergence is where something, a device or a platform or an app, allows an audience to consume various types of media texts. So here, obviously, if we think of how Twitter works, when you and I use Twitter, we're able to access media texts in various industries. We can read information, we can listen to media texts, we can watch media texts. So if we think about all those different industries that we talked about at the very start, they're all there on Twitter. The same can be said for modern games consoles as well. They allow us to watch a film on them, to browse the internet on them, to listen to music on them. So again, both of those, both Twitter and games consoles, are examples of what media students term media convergence. All these different industries and sectors are converging into one device or into one platform. And of course, probably the most obvious example of convergence, right there. I don't think any more needs to be said, but I will because I'm a teacher. Yeah, with that in your hand or in your pocket, you've got an entire world of media that you can access. All of those industries, all of those sectors are right there in the palm of your hand, which is why they've been completely revolutionary in terms of the media landscape. So before I wrap up, I just wanted to walk you through what the end of lesson task is here, because obviously there's some new vocabulary that I've shown and introduced you to today. So the task is to enable you to get more comfortable with this terminology and to use it in practice. So taking the terms of sectors or industries, bearing in mind only one of those terms will be relevant to your qualification. So make sure you know whether to use industries or sectors, but also convergence and synergy, using those terms to either describe or analyze or evaluate the major producers of media texts. And I've given you some examples there: Disney, BBC, Sony. There could have been others that I could have used, but those were the most obvious ones that came to me at the time. So to describe how a company like BBC uses synergy, uses convergence. So just to break it down, the difference between describe, analyze, and evaluate, I want to use an analogy, if I may. If we think about the weather for a moment, if I look out of the window and I just describe the weather, I'm just kind of, saying it's raining. I'm not really going into any particular detail as to why that might be or what has led up to that happening. If we carry on using the analogy of the weather, if I analyze the weather, I'm not just going to be telling you that it's raining or that it's sunny. I'm going to be giving you some of the reasons behind that. So when you're writing these responses to how Disney or Sony use synergy or convergence, I want you to think of that analogy. Are you just describing it in basic terms, what's happening, or are you starting to look at what's underpinning it, why that might be happening, what difference it makes to the audience? By doing that, you're going to be analyzing and evaluating when you talk about them. So I hope that's of use to you. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. I hope it's been informative. And yes, I'll see you tomorrow for some more GCSE media studies content. Have a good day.
Oh, we thank Matthew very much for him helping us out with that. And please do get in touch and let us know what you think of the lessons or the way that you'd like the lessons to be delivered, etc., etc., etc. In return, I promise I'll find somewhere to cut my hair, even if we are still on lockdown for a while. Nish and I will be back in a few minutes with a maths lesson.